Hello, everyone. We'll wait a few minutes for everybody to come on. And of course, my fabulous co host and colleague and friend will be joining us in a minute. But my name is Kristian Roberts. I am with Taking the Stage with Kristian and Quo. I am waiting on my fabulous friend and co host, Quo Johnson, to join me. While we're here, let's do a check in. I know we here in Texas, don't laugh at us, people from other places that are colder, are dealing with ice and such right now, and slippery roads. And, if you're from the South, particularly from Texas, we don't really do that here. Our schools are closed, businesses have closed, and many of us are working from home. Thank you to our fearless leader, Ian Dare at Dallas Opera. So just FYI. Oh yeah, Quo told me to let her in. There she is. I did not see her. My bad, friend. My bad, for real. All right. I did let her in. She should be joining us
Okay.
now. Girl, I was on the struggle. I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I was on the struggle bus for a second there. I did
That's
not
okay.
did not
That's
see
okay.
well. Let me adjust my. Okay, there we go. I feel like it was only getting my chin, half my chin. So I was just telling everybody that we here in Texas, this is not what we're used to. So don't laugh at us people that are in places like Minnesota and Canada and that deal with real snow and
Mhm.
problems. But we in Texas we stay home or we do delayed starts, and that sort of thing because we just don't do ice and snow here.
Mhm.
Not like that. And remember what happened last year around about this time, the snowpocalypse. So
And
might as well wear
actually,
it.
I can speak to that in today's episode, right? In when
Yes,
do we remain, right? When do we remain and what things? So I'm excited about that.
that's
Hello,
a good one.
everyone. I hear Christian kind of sharing our experience, but let us know how you're doing. We do hope that for our friends and family who are also dealing with the weather, that you all are warm and that you're safe. For those who are dealing with different types of things, let us know how you're doing. Thank you for joining us for today's episode.
Yeah,
uh, do check in, and I'm going to pass it back over to Christian. Go for it.
yeah. So everybody, just a little intro here. I'm Kristian Roberts, of course. I'm here with my fabulous friend and co-host,
Quodicia Johnson.
and we are back for our second live episode, our second episode, in fact, of 2022, for taking the stage with Christian.
And Quo. And of course, as we begin every episode, we will always start with a land and people acknowledgement because it is important to acknowledge how we got here. It is important to acknowledge the ways in which past events still impact us today. So many people say, oh, it happened so long ago, but I assure you, many of these operas that we put on the stage actually are older than some of these events. So with that being said, in the ways that we connect with one another, in the ways that we connect in truth, and in the ways that we honestly bring our full selves into the space, I want to take the time to acknowledge that we in Dallas are on stolen land. We are on the land of the Caddo, the Wichita, and the Comanche sovereign nations, nations of human beings, of souls who live the full human experience, despite the ways in which we tell stories about them. Nations of human beings who loved, who lost, who fought, and who cultivated the land since time immemorial. Nations of human beings who also faced horrible conditions, including policy and genocide that forced them from their lands. I do also want to take the time to acknowledge that people were stolen from their homes and brought here to what is now Dallas and forced into free and enslaved labor. From that free, enslaved, and stolen labor, land, and lives, we now have what we enjoy as Dallas. Of course, none of us created these conditions. That is the same for all the systems that we're in. We did not create these systems. We did not create these conditions. But we do have the honor, we have the opportunity, we have the responsibility, we have the capability to make sure that we heal the harm, that we reduce the harm going forward, and that we connect so we can create even greater and more fuller stories and narratives about this land and the people. So I thank you for joining us for this land and people acknowledgement.
And of course, we thank you overall for joining us from wherever you are in the world. We want to acknowledge today that we are fully aware of what's going on in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. The world events do not occur in the vacuum, and inevitably they affect all of us. So our thoughts are with people who are in that situation and dealing with that. Being in an international art form like opera, we have friends and colleagues who are directly affected by this, even though as a global citizen, global community, we are all affected by it anytime anything like this happens. So just like we acknowledged with, with when we talked about Afghanistan and pulling out of there and everything that went down with that, we want to acknowledge what is going on in Ukraine. And for anybody that is dealing with trouble in their own backyard, we are thinking of you at this time. Today's episode, we always want to we're going to talk about something that is happening just across at least I know here in the U.S. it's happening across the nation. The pandemic really had people at home and had them sitting and trying to and thinking about their lives. And as a result of that, we've seen something that has been coined called the Great Resignation. And we talk about that, and it's across every industry. Every industry is having these conversations, from the medical field to particularly the medical field, to our teachers, frontline workers, and of course, just like in corporate and just like anything else, yeah, arts are not exempt. The same conversations are happening for multiple reasons. And so we thought we'd take a little dive in that today, particularly when it comes to the conversation of human-centered organization. And so, Quo, let's dive on into this because it's a topic that we've been discussing and just looking at, and having conversations with our own colleagues, across the field and across multiple different areas of the arts. So. Let's talk about this a little bit. Let's just dive in. Let's talk about the Great Resignation, itself.
Okay. Like I'm over here smiling, like, okay, let's talk about Great Resignation. So Great Resignation, as Kristian just mentioned, for those who do not know, people are straight up leaving their jobs. They are walking off, they are walking away, they are resigning. There is this very, very real and very vivid, I would say very visceral as well, approach to work and working environments right now. Yes, it has been impacted by the onset of the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic and the experiences coming out of it. But what we wanted to do was to talk about the impact that organizations have on the lives of the people who work within the organization, the impact of the culture of an organization on its employees, and priorities. What does it mean when we prioritize our own health and well-being over being inside of toxic organizations or within toxic industries? Because we do have people who are leaving the industry as well, just as we have people who are coming into the industry. And the ways in which we as leaders, we as individuals have to be mindful of what are we asking people to come and do every single day. At the end of the day, when we set our priorities, are we asking people to walk into an environment that is absolutely dehumanizing? Are we asking people to walk into an environment or to walk into a stage or to walk into a rehearsal that feels horrible? Not because it is difficult, not because the work is challenging, but simply because their humanity is being denied or dismissed or ignored. Or as we look at tokenism, right? There's a lot of conversations about tokenism going right now. During the Racial Justice Opera Forum, I gave the definition. Tokenism is representation without agency. As we have a lot of organizations who are seeking, right? We said collecting people like Pokemon, which is a no-no, you're not supposed to do that. But as organizations are seeking greater diversity within different identities, within staff, on the board, on stage, there's this big hustle, there's this big desire to go and get as many people as possible to show that an organization is diverse in whatever way. Racially diverse, gender-wise, gender identity, ability, disability, all these things, age. We're looking at making sure that our organizations start to represent our communities in some type of way. But what are we actually asking these individuals to do? One individual, two individuals, 10 new employees cannot fix the issues that were already in place for an organization, which made it necessary in order for you to go and get those individuals, right? If there were already problems to begin with, going and hiring people without changing the actual culture of the organization is literally pulling people into very hostile and dehumanizing situations, because the organization has to, not even the organization, leadership of organizations have to be honest about the fact that you need more people because you do not have them. You do not have them because you were in a situation where either they were ignored, there are barriers, inherent barriers that you yourself did not create. But to simply assume that our organizations can just be fixed by getting more people without actively asking yourself, what am I inviting people into, or what am I requiring people to do, is part of this resignation, right? Real talk, part of this
Hmm.
resignation flow. It's a question
Well,
of, will I prioritize my humanity today?
mhm.
Will I prioritize my bills? Am I here just to pay my bills? And at one point, is that not enough?
Well, and how effective, and particularly in a creative industry like ours, can that be when you can't bring your yourself into the space, and you because part of yourself is what develops your full skill set, and your talents to contribute to this thing, right? I recall that Dr. King actually had the same worry in the 60s when he was fighting to integrate and fighting for civil rights and the Voting Act and bus boycotts, all these things that were going on. And he said, I fear that something to the tune of, I fear that I've integrated them into a burning house, my people into a burning house. That is the equivalent of bringing people into your organizations where the problems have been so thick, or there have been issues, systemic issues that we talk about on this show all the time, and they're simply saying, okay, let's hire a rainbow of people, for lack of a better word, bring them in here, and go, like that's the end all be all.
Yeah,
And that doesn't work. That doesn't work anywhere unless those people are giving agency, given decision making power that is
right.
truly utilized, right? It's not enough to have a seat at the table if every time you speak up
Mm-hmm.
in the room with the table, you're
Yeah.
ignored, right?
You're ignored, or you're having to continuously defend what you're saying, or you're having to go through all of these hurdles to translate your experiences to others who will never understand them because they do not live them. when
Correct.
we when we prioritize trying to understand someone else's lived experience, we prioritize our own competency over someone else's truth. They may very well be incompetent and incapable of understanding someone else's experience, and that's completely okay. That's human. That's what's so beautiful about it. Rather than understanding someone else's experience, it's important that we trust that what people say and how people explain their experience, we trust them. I can't get somebody else who does not live my experience to explain everything to me, or to put it in a way that allows me to better understand, or to better prove, or to qualify that experience. So as we're looking at bringing more people into organizations during this time of the Great Resignation, we want to be mindful of the ways in which our organizations and the culture of our organizations contribute to people having miserable experiences at work, right?
Mhm.
We want to start with that. Someone else mentioned the ways that it also burns up revenue. I think
Yep.
Casa House, thank you for that. It does, because of course the turnover and the inability to continue to keep your employees, the inability to ensure that your employees are thriving, right? That there is challenge, but there is also support to meet those challenges so that there's growth for the entire organization. It is not enough just to identify somebody so that you can check a box and say, oh, let's hire this person and bring them in. It is not enough. As we look at what is happening right now, people are literally walking off jobs because it's not enough.
I
It
mean,
is not enough
ghosting.
in this
Like
time.
it's not funny, but when you hear some of these stories, like again, we have friends that work in different fields, and I mean, the announcement of a return to office policy prompts a slew of resignation letters, to HR, and this is in a completely different industry that I'm talking about, but there was a partner of mine that really, a friend of mine that really had that happen to her. And she said, she's the HR person, and she said they announced the return to office, said there was no possibility for remote work, or a hybrid situation, and people were like, basically people said, I feel a little insulted since I've been doing this since 2020 from my
Mm-hmm.
home.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're
Mm-hmm.
making, and again, I'm not saying that there's not room for compromise. What I'm saying is, if inevitably your employers are saying, can we come to a compromise, and you say, no, just come on back, that's what happened. I'm not
Right.
knocking anybody's decisions in leadership. What I'm saying is, this is real, and this is happening across the board. People are saying, "Oh, so you're really not okay." Well, I don't want to work for a place like that, and that's really unfortunate. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because then that puts everybody into a hiring frenzy. You're trying to fill positions. The people that remain are doubled and tripled with work, and that's okay for a little bit of time. But here's what the kicker is: many people are not replacing those positions at all and claiming a labor shortage or a worker shortage, or people don't want to work. I'm not making this up. Really and truly, you can go and look at experts who are talking about this right now. And they're saying this, and they're doing this now. All I'm saying is that when you have that sort of attitude overall in business, I don't care what the business is, business of singing, business of producing, flying can openers, whatever it is that you do, workers have had time to sit and evaluate and go and decide what's important in their life, and what they want to prioritize when they go into an office, when they walk onto a stage, when they go into a pit, whatever it is. They're starting to do that, and I would say that the arts are not exempt from that. We're not exempt from that. Anything that affects, we live in our opera bubble. We love our world, but it affects us too.
Yeah.
So I just bring that up as an example, because my friend said that, and I was like, she was like, yeah, I had like five come across my desk within the hour of the announcement. I was like, whoa.
And as we're mindful that our work does not occur in a vacuum, we always say, especially at the Dallas Opera, when we do check-ins, because the things that you were dealing with before work don't end just because you came to work. The things you're going to have to deal with after work don't go away just because you are at work. So acknowledging that a lot of our experiences outside of work, for those who actually kind of separate or unplug, which is kind of difficult in the arts in many cases,
Mhm.
but for those of us who actually create that separation or are trying to create that separation, we're mindful that we are impacted. We're mindful that what our experiences are in outside of work impacts work. So we are mindful that the pandemic has allowed a lot of people to reevaluate priorities.
Mhm.
Again, we're looking at priorities. The question that we proposed, or the questions we proposed, was when do we remain? When do we resign? And what do we resign? And right, in what ways? As we look at opportunities to remain, I want to talk specifically to those who are already dealing with so many challenges at work before we got heavily into this equity work. Those who were dealing with the inequities and in this very messy, very painful, but very healing road to equity, because it is not just this, here's the answer, go for it. It definitely is a journey. In this space, I want us to consider what makes us remain. Why are we
Mhm.
here?
Yes.
What are we hoping to gain in being here? What are we sacrificing in choosing to remain? Understanding bills, right? Bills, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
We always have to pay our bills. And that is no joke. That is honestly a big part of a lot of things. What are you sacrificing in order to remain here? And what are you hoping to command in order to remain at your organization? That's questions that I've had to ask myself within my organizations. I knew that it was a meaningful place for me to remain, right? In all of the challenges and all of the conversations. And I thought we talked about this. I thought we learned, right? When I knew that I was growing as an individual, I knew that I was growing and I was learning and I was within an organization and within opportunities, not just to challenge what has already been done, but to create and co-create new ways to do things. Because that's who I am as an individual. For those who like structure and you like the way it is, right? Are you in alignment with that at your organization? Do the values of the organization align with your own values in different ways? And if they don't, is it enough for you to just get a paycheck? Let's be real. And that's
Particularly
cool.
in a creative field. And either way, and again, we're not telling people what to do or not to do. I'm not in the business of doing that. Particularly since we're adults here. We make our own decisions, and everybody knows what's going on in their life and what they can do. What I would also ask you though, in that organization, not only how it's affecting you, but how you not bringing your full self or not aligning with the organization is affecting the organization, right? Bills are real. We're it's real, and
And we will not
these
pretend
lights
that
have to
it's
stay
not.
on,
We will not
but
and
we
if that's the case, right, that is completely okay. What are you doing for yourself, right? When we center
hmm
our own humanity, what are we doing for ourselves? Not even just to look at the next step, but in determining how I want to walk away from work today.
hmm
How do I
or
want to
how I want to
feel
walk
today?
in,
How do I want to
you
walk
know,
in, right?
yeah.
We've heard people a lot of times talk about setting intentionality. As we set intentionality, shout out to Andrea Joy, Andrea Joy Pearson, as we set intentionality, what other things must we also consider in systemic ways, right? What other things are we bringing to the office? What other expectations are we having? And have we voiced those expectations? And have you not just drawn a line? I don't want to say draw a line in the sand, but have we determined what our peace and what our day is worth? Because a
It's the
lot of
boundaries.
times,
It's about the boundaries
the
for
boundaries, because
ourselves.
a lot of times when we're in our organizations, and we saw everybody doesn't have the opportunity to just say, I'm not coming to work if you make me come to work. Everybody doesn't have that opportunity. I want us to consider what makes us stay, and is that worth it? And can we get that somewhere else? Not saying leave your organizations, but what makes us stay, and can we lean into it? Can we lean into it more? Can we expand it? Can we create it to work for us and for the entire organization? Right? As members of an organization, there's different ways that we can impact our organizations. But when we look at why we remain and when it's time to resign, we want to be honest about the boundaries that we set for ourselves and then the ways that we see opportunity for change. Kristian, when you first started, you talked about the weather here. And I also, so last year in Texas, we had a freeze. We can go back and look at these episodes. We couldn't even do an episode that week. It was a
hmm
freeze. I ain't had no power. It was tough out here. And it was honestly traumatic for the whole community because
hmm
some communities were had a completely different experience compared to others who did not have water, who did not have power. What the Dallas Opera did was provide hotel rooms for those who did not have power, who did not have water. And it is not to brag or boast, but like, ooh, Dallas Opera's doing great. I just told y'all it's hard out here.
Yes, it
But
is.
to have an organization that says, what do you need? What is equitable for our employees? How do we take the time and the resources to make sure that our employees and their families have their basic needs met before we start talking to them about all these other things? And this was during the Heart Institute of Women's Conductors, right? Women conductors. So we had programming and things going on. So it's important that we're mindful of what makes us stay. And then I think it's important that we're mindful of when is it time for us not to just resign, but what things can we resign? Right? What structures can we start to resign as organizations? What practices can we resign as organizations during this great resignation? If we're realizing with priorities that is not a priority, that is not as important as we thought it was, that's not as helpful and not as meaningful as we thought it was, how do we just let it go?
hmm
Just how do we walk out?
Yeah, and we talk about tradition, and people who are traditionalists and this sort of thing, and there are things there are practices in such that don't serve us. They don't serve us, and we have recognized that. We've also recognized that the pandemic forced us to be creative and innovative in ways we never thought. What do we keep from that? What do we resign from that? What did we use before the pandemic that we no longer need?
Right.
Okay, what do we resign? What things do we keep from before the pandemic, and how do we bring those things together to move forward as
Mm-hmm.
we are moving through this pandemic right now, because it's still very much here.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we continue to do that? We knew we need to put COVID testing protocols and vaccines, all this stuff in place at our companies in order to be able to move forward and put opera back on the traditional stage. We adjusted to that, so we're going to keep that, right? Like we're gonna keep some of that. We're gonna modify as we need to, but we're doing that. This is what I'm saying, and that's just like an obvious example. Now, in your city, in your organization, wherever you are, it's gonna look different because you're not in Dallas, Texas with us. We don't, your city and your relationship to your city better than anybody else in your community. And that's all we're saying. Let's consider that some of the things we were doing before need to be resigned.
I don't even want to say
Okay.
let's consider. Consider
Let's
and
do
know that some of the things that we were doing,
it.
some of the things that we were doing before, we need to resign them as a part of this great resignation. That is a call not just to organizational leadership, but that is a call to everyone in the industry, everyone in the arts. This is a call to my colleagues, my fellow artists. There are things that during this time where we can release, during this time where we can shed, during this time when we look up and say, what is my priority? Not just for today. If we can only go day by day, what is my priority today? Mm-hmm. How do I keep that at the center of my priority? How do I unapologetically, right? How do I unapologetically bring my full self and bring my human self into work today? How do I lead by example, if necessary, for organizations to have a more human-centered approach to work environments? We are not in a space where, for everyone, where work is just work. Sometimes work is just work. That is cool. It is difficult to say that to people in the arts. I want to acknowledge that. It is very difficult to say that to people in the arts. So since we're in the arts and we like to use the art to say, oh, we do these beautiful things. What beautiful things are we doing for our employees? What beautiful things are we doing for our communities? Truly, what are we asking people to sacrifice or to engage within or to help us build when we ask them to come to work? Not even ask, right? When we say, yeah, come to work. Or when we say, yes, we'll have this employment status where this is what you'll be doing. It's not just a job for a lot of people.
No, not in this industry, no.
It can be so much more for our industry. But we have to resign, right? We have to let go of, and we have to resign the structures that treated people as disposable objects. We have to resign the power hoarding that took place. We have to resign the inability to acknowledge our humanity in this work as we're telling human stories. That's not the biggest disconnect. I don't know what is. We're telling human stories. Human beings are telling these stories. Human beings have stories, right? We want to be mindful of that. You can do that and still run a business. I promise. I promise. You can do it and still run a business.
Yeah, and to me, it really comes down to priority. What are you prioritizing? And I know this may sound, we often people say this sounds you're sounding like you want a utopia. You're sounding like you're looking for some sort of perfection, and you sound like you're looking for something that's not realistic. And I understand that, because when something has been done a certain way for so long, when we take what I mean seriously, if you look at the white supremacy culture norms and how they show up in offices, in business and in work, and there have been plenty of people who have looked at that list and gone, we consider some of this good just business practice. That's what we thought. We didn't realize we were putting people in, precarious positions and hurting business. And the more and more that it's coming up that this is actually not helpful for your bottom line,
It's
people are
not.
starting to, like not only is it not good for the people in the organization, but it, quite frankly, it's not good for the money. I mean, the revenue. Somebody just said it, and that's really unfortunate. So, I mean, I would say just I know a lot of people, want to, shut down around this topic and want to say, oh well, it's the arts and we just love everything and we love everybody, but we have some of these same issues because it is a business. It is a business, in a capitalistic society. That's what it is. So all we're saying is that consider that things can be done a different way.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say, even in the example that you gave, we all get along. We're creating this beautiful art form. We all love everybody, quotation marks. Consider that your environment, right, and how you experience an environment may be extremely different from someone else's environment. Consider that your love may not be enough. That's a whole other conversation. As is, consider the intentions of your love in a good place. Consider the impact of your love might be harmful because it doesn't align, right?
And if you don't believe her, talk to some of these healthcare workers that are leaving the field in tears because they love what they do. They love caring for patients. They like who they work with. And they're burnt out and they're tired because of, I mean, it was happening before the pandemic. It was already an issue before the pandemic. I read somewhere that I think 1 in 5 healthcare workers have resigned since the beginning of the pandemic. 2/3 of critical care workers, I think nurses, I can't remember exactly, but 2/3 of them are saying that they're considering leaving now. So please understand, there are teachers right now. I think I read somewhere over 60% of some teachers in places are saying that they don't think they'll be back next year. And they love the kids. And again, they leave in tears because they know that they're needed. They know the importance of it. But the environment has become such where they can't deal with it anymore. And they have families of their own that they have to take care of.
And we know that even in the arts industry, we have a lot of people who are resigning, right? We know we have a lot of people in the arts industry who are arts industry. This is in theater. This is in ballet spaces. This is in opera. This is in other dance spaces. This is in symphony. People who are resigning because of the challenge of having to honestly run a different type of organization. This time of the Great Resignation requires that we become different types of organizations. Does not mean that our missions have to shift or have to change, but the ways in which we run our organizations and the culture of our organization has to shift so that we can move more into a human-centered space so we can take care of the human beings who are actually doing the work. That is what we mean when we say human-centered, to consider and to take action in the ways that will actually change our organizations. For those who are wanting and requiring, because you should, a human-centered work environment, it is also the shift that we have to take in the boundaries that we create. It is the shift that we have to take in how we approach our work in the day. It is the shift in what we have to consider to be true to ourselves and to be honest with ourselves. Again, if this is just a job, that's okay. Let it just be a job. You do the best you can do. You collect your coins, do what you need to do. For those who want to be in a space that they want to become better, you have to actively determine, what am I going to do to prioritize my humanity today? What am I going to do to also show others how they will also prioritize their humanity? How will I prioritize the humanity of myself and of others? That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's it. That's really the bottom line. And like I said, we weren't coming here today to start revolution. And I'm going to say again, because I know whenever we start talking like this, people go, but it's a business. We have to run a business, as if we're not fully aware of that.
How you gonna run a business if everybody quitting? How you gonna run a business if everybody here? Okay.
How are you gonna run a business if your employees are calling in sick and tired because they call a beat down because of the stress of the environment and all this kind of? I mean, seriously, this you need people. You need people to do the work. Okay, I could get started on that all day, but I won't because I know there's also a movement where people are like start your own business, start your own business. Well, if everybody is an entrepreneur and has their own business, who's going to be your employee? I just make it make sense to me. That's all I'm saying. Okay, I'm back. I'm gonna come back from that. But my point is, I went over here for a minute, but I have to come back. But I saw I got some heart reacts, so I know people like that. This is our point, y'all. Is that we are at a time where we have done a lot of change. We've seen a lot of changes in the industry, right? We've seen a lot of people, and just across industries right now, where people are saying, "What is important to me? What am I prioritizing in my life?" I have aging parents. I have young children that I want to spend more time with, and they are actively seeking positions that line up with that. And the arts are not exempt. And all I'm saying is please consider, even though we create beauty, we get together and we become like families, and we see each other most of the time, particularly in heavy blocks of particularly when you do shows in rep. I mean, we are there constantly. We're constantly moving. We know there are going to be times of ebb and flow. We know there are going to be times where you have to put in, more than 40 hours a week because we're in production. We're not saying that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. In this industry, you are aware of it. What we are saying though is what happens after those shows, after that heavy time. How are you prioritizing your employees? Are you saying, come in on Monday, for a half day? Nobody log on until noon. These sorts of things. Just ebb and flow to understand that somebody probably just worked 30 days in a row, and understand that.
I'll even say not even after the productions. What are you doing to
During.
prioritize humanity during?
Yeah.
We know that in order, right? I'll go with singers. We know that in order to actually do the best performance, you should be in a very, very healthy position. We know that there are unhealthy things that we do to the voice when we're continuously damaging our bodies, when we're continuously singing, when we're continuously not taking care of ourselves. It is the same. If we are to do our best work, we have to make sure that we actually take care of ourselves. If our organizations are going to do the best work to fulfill the mission that we have for our companies and for our communities, we have to make sure that we are taking care of the team and the people who are doing the work. Otherwise, it does not get done.
No, and I go back to it again. You have a human resources person. Human resources. Human resources. People. Person. Living entity whose skill set and talents came to your organization because you brought them on to utilize them. Right?
Yeah.
You have to make, just like you would take care of maintenance on in your orchestra pits or in the opera house or any of your equipment, costume sets, all the things we need to do to keep those things functioning the way that we need to. We have to make sure that our human resources are the same. Now, don't be wrong. A lot of that falls on personal responsibility as well. But please create the environment where somebody can come in and know that they are human first. That's all we're saying. That's it. That's all we're saying. Folks, I think that about wraps it up. But Quo, I want you to give your positive notes. It's about that time. We've been talking for a while. I'm glad you all that are here stuck with us. We very much appreciate you. Quo, those positive notes.
Positive notes. In this time of the Great Resignation, it does not just have to be simply walking away from jobs, but it can also represent walking away from the things that no longer serve us. It's okay if we picked it up at the time and it served us. It's okay to put it down. It's okay to walk away from it as an organization, to walk away from practices. It is okay to walk away from environments that we've created as organizations. It is okay for us to put those down and to resign them. Because the beautiful thing that happens when you put something down that you've been holding on to you that does not serve you is that you open up your hands to receive something better. When you open up multiple hands for all the rest of your organization and for your employees, you open up so many more spaces to co-create something that does serve you and that will serve the whole of you as an organization. This will serve the whole of you as an individual. So in this time of the Great Resignation, I encourage us to resign the things that no longer serve us. I encourage us to boldly, right, approach the things that we need, and then to have the courage and to have the compassion to create those spaces together as we do our work in whatever industry that is. Let us continue to prioritize our humanity, knowing that when we look at the human being first, that will absolutely give us the opportunity to create all of the wonderful things that we're needing to do and to fulfill our mission as we continue in this space of co-creation and creativity. So those are my positive notes.
All right, Quo, thank you so much for being on point as usual. Folks, please take care of yourselves. Please continue to be bold and be creative. All right. Set your intention. Thank you, Andrea Joy Pearson. That's a good one. But thank you all so much for joining us. Like I said, take care of yourselves. And artists, again, like we always say, you are needed. Okay, you are wanted. And please, please, all of us who are back at work in our traditional way and putting on live opera again, folks, take time to enjoy and celebrate. You know, it took a lot to get back here. So again, sit back and enjoy and celebrate it. And with that, we thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you all for joining us. Goodbye.
Oh, and Kaza, we saw you. Hit us up when you get here.
Yes. Yes.
Bye, y'all.